The world has gone mad and the system is broken, at least according to the famous investor Ray Dalio. And unsurprisingly, his logical assertions about the current economic climate bode well for Bitcoin. But while Ray paints a rather dire picture of the current economic situation, I am not intending this video to be a doom and gloom kind of video. No, far from it. Knowledge is power. You have got to inform yourselves about what is going on at the macro level. I know we cover this stuff a lot here on the channel. I think Ray brought up some really great points and laid it out quite well, even if I've talked about some of this stuff before. Because the things that are happening on Wall Street and in Washington and in Beijing and in Brussels, all of that stuff, even though it seems far away, can directly impact your life in incredibly serious ways. It happened in 2008. People's lives were changed dramatically. People lost their homes. People lost their jobs. People lost their life savings. And yes, of course, a few smart people made incredible fortunes off of that event. And according to Ray, the current system is completely unsustainable and the proverbial can will not be able to be kicked down the road much longer. So let's cover a few of Ray Dalio's key points and why he believes that we are in for a major paradigm shift economically. By the way, there's a link down below to the original article if you want to have a read through the whole thing. So Ray's first major point is that central banks have injected an enormous amount of money into the world economy, which has been pushing up asset prices, but which hasn't had any real meaningful effect on economic growth or inflation. Essentially, free money is not fixing the problems caused by printing free money. Surprise! Surprise! I know, guys, right? The central banks keep pushing out just giant sums of money in an absolutely vain attempt to try to push economic activity up. But it is simply not working the way they want it to, because the money keeps flowing to people who are not spending it. They're simply investing it, stock buybacks and all that fun kind of stuff. Even if they're investing it in these low or negative yield products, which seems insane, but they're doing it. This is having the carry-on effect of pushing up the prices of assets like stocks and properties across the board to insane valuations beyond what they probably should be. The crazy amounts of cheap money splashing around the markets means that so many of these stocks, they're just getting valuations that are just way blown out of proportion. You know, they're just really based on hopes and dreams that something's gonna be totally freaking awesome in the future, not on the fundamentals of making profits or of having clear paths to making profits. Obviously there's exceptions, but increasingly that's the trend. There's so much money flowing around that even venture firms are trying to force more money onto startups, even going so far as to threaten them, if you don't take our money, then we're going to go off and fund your competitors to crush you. What? That's ridiculous. Fund managers have insanely large piles of cash that they need to invest in order to meet the promises of their clients. So they have to find a place to put that money. Warren Buffett, as an example, is reportedly sitting on $128 billion in cash. I guess he's waiting to buy the upcoming stock market dip. These kinds of money problems may seem, quite foreign to the average person because you're not in the club, but it really underlines how the central bank's faucet of free money is making things worse, not better. Now on to Ray's next major point. Government deficits are big and they are rising all the time, and the healthcare and pension obligations are becoming increasingly difficult to satisfy. The deficits, these require huge, absolutely huge amounts of debt to be sold by governments. Amounts that cannot be absorbed without pushing up interest rates. which is really coming at exactly a time when such a rise would be devastating for markets and economies because the world is so leveraged long. By the way, the United States just hit $23 trillion in debt the other day. $23 trillion. It increases without end, and it increases without question from the political class. And how will central banks fund the deficits and buy the bonds? Why, by printing more money, of course. What else would they do? That is like fighting a fire with gasoline. Crazy stuff. And that means, of course, more inflation, which means that regular people will continue to be crushed by the system while the elites continue to get cheap money and to buy up everything they can get their hands on. Which, of course, only accelerates the level of the problems, especially in the reserve currency countries, the United States, Europe, and Japan. And while that fire is burning away, the printing money fire, the pension and healthcare liability payments are increasingly coming due. But unfortunately, the groups obligated to pay those payments are increasingly lacking the ability to do it. The result is that benefits for regular people are cut due to increased pressure on budgets, or taxes are raised. Of course, taxes get raised. And who does the burden of that usually fall on? Wage earners, because they can't escape it. They cannot afford the accountants required to move money around the world to all the offshore zones and take advantage of all the tax loopholes and all that fun kind of stuff. Or it's simply being done by printing money. And printing money, of course, just steadily robs the regular people of their wealth because the government and the banks and their buddies all front run you. No matter what happens, regular people are likely to lose because the game is rigged in favor of the elite ruling class. But printing money, it's the easiest and it is the most insidious way of painting over the cracks and of robbing everyone blind by transferring massive amounts of wealth up. The situation is increasingly spiraling out of control. We just have basically QE4 just started, and they're not calling it QE, but it's QE4. The non-stop money printing threatens the viability of the world's three major reserve currency as viable stores of wealth in the long term. All of which is resulting in completely unsustainable levels of inequality, which really has long-term negative impacts for society. You bring in inflation and technological advances and really the lack of access to the kind of cheap money that the wealthy have access to, and you really just understand how all of this is adding to the growing fragility of the system. Totally opposite of Bitcoin, by the way. Bitcoin, the more you attack it, the stronger it gets. Neoliberalism has failed. Now, neoliberalism, in case you don't know, is defined broadly as a system characterized by free market trade, deregulation of financial markets, individualization, and the shift away from the welfare provision state. But the trickle-down economic system of letting the rich, get all the money and stuff, that's just a trick. It's little more than the banker class peeing on you. That's trickle-down. That's the trickle, guys. And to be clear, I'm not advocating for socialism, so stop typing Lark is a socialist in the comment section. Yes, I see you, cut it out. Seriously. But the prevailing ethos of what capitalism is does not match with the reality of a deeply flawed system which is simply not working very well for most people. Has capitalism left lots of people out of poverty? Yes. But that doesn't mean that it's working perfectly now. Dalio is right about the flaws of our current capitalist order, and that is not to say the concept of capitalism itself is bad, not at all. But the current reality is that capitalism, as many people imagine it to be, doesn't exist anywhere. We are firmly in the depths of a crony capitalist takeover with the oligarchs firmly in the driver's seat. It's happening in the US, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in China, it's happening all over the place. And they are capturing the lion's share of all the gains that are happening. Now, how have they done this? It's pretty simple. They have done this by buying politicians, which then write the rules in favor of the oligarch class. Crony capitalism, by the way, is defined as being an economic system in which businesses thrive, not as a result of good business practices or of taking risks, but rather as a return on money amassed through a nexus between a business class and the political class. In such a system, the false appearance of pure capitalism is publicly maintained in order to preserve the exclusive influence of well-connected individuals. The money of the elites washing through every single level of politics has created a system which is largely a system where we see socialism for the rich. We can see as evidenced in a whole lot of different ways, whether we look at the bank bailouts from back in 2008, or we can look at the study from Princeton, which found that in the US, for example, it's now basically an oligarchy since the majority of laws reflect the will of special interest groups, particularly the wealthy special interest groups, not the average citizen. And of course, you have the central banks printing money, handing it right over to the banks and front-running everybody. And then, by contrast, you have the middle class and the poor who are getting the Darwinian style of capitalism. And you can't have a society that works with socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. That system is unsustainable, and it will eventually collapse under its own sick bloat. Now look, Ray Dalio's comments do not mean that there will be a major crash tomorrow. Run for the hills, Armageddon time. I mean, technically, it could happen. Look what's happening in the repo market right now. QE4 has started for a reason. Could happen tomorrow, but probably not. The situation is likely to continue for years and years to come, just kicking the can down the road again and again and again. And look, if everything I've just talked about leaves you feeling like you are drowning in an ocean of corruption and lies and nepotism and dirty deals and inflation and all this craziness, well, here comes the Bitcoin life raft. You can save yourself from the insanity that is the current fiat Ponzi scam that is going on globally. Yes, it's true. Ray Dalio does not talk about Bitcoin in his article. He's a gold guy, which is cool. Respect to that. But his arguments strongly make a case for Bitcoin. The macroeconomic picture is a mess. Bitcoin was made as a response to 2008, as a response to this mess. I've covered extensively here on the channel the coming together of Bitcoin and all of the macroeconomic picture and macroeconomic investors and all these different people, and it's already been impactful. We see the institutions coming in. We see the high net worth individuals coming in. We see the capital control evaders. We see people who are fleeing the chaos of critical fiat failure in places like Argentina, in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, and others. They're all getting a seat on the lifeboat when they buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is becoming increasingly appealing as a safe haven asset and also as an unconfiscatable, unstoppable store of wealth. The macro trends chipping away at the economy will spark interest in Bitcoin from an increasingly wide range of people. For those people who are paying attention, Bitcoin, it seems obvious. For those people who are still asleep, they will tragically become victims of monumental forces that are incredibly powerful and are totally out of their control. Cryptocurrency and gold, they put you in charge of your own financial destiny. Banking makes you a victim. Everything covered here is really part of the why for me when it comes to Bitcoin. Happy to be a Bitcoin owner personally. So what do you guys think? Is Ray Dalio onto something with all of this? Is the macroeconomic outlook so damn grim for the global economy? Is Bitcoin an answer to all of this craziness? Let me know down below, guys. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Oh, you guys freaking rock, so thank you so much. And of course, if you did enjoy it, hit that thumbs up button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Long live the blockchain, and peace out till next time.